not just by media, not just by culture, but by the very systems that were supposed to represent truth. What if I told you that one of the most powerful spiritual institutions on earth has veiled something so deep, so shocking, that if exposed, it wouldn't just shake your faith, it would ignite it? Pope Leo XIV, a name that shouldn't even exist, because there is no Pope Leo XIV, at least not yet. But there are whispers, symbols, and documents buried in plain sight that point to a coming deception, a fabrication of leadership, a counterfeit of holiness, a man who may rise under the banner of God, but speak with the tongue of the serpent. And here's why this matters to you. If you don't understand the difference between power and purity, between the image of holiness and the substance of truth, you'll fall for anything, including leaders who look righteous, but leave your soul empty. Young man, this is bigger than the Vatican. This is about your discernment, your manhood, your ability to stand when others bow. What you're about to hear might make you uncomfortable. Good. Because maybe God doesn't want you comfortable. Maybe He wants you awake. You ever notice how sometimes the most powerful things are the ones you don't see yet? There's no Pope Leo XIV right now. Not officially, not publicly. But there's something about that name. It shows up in whispers. In private theological circles, it's referenced in visions, in warnings, in texts written long before any of us were born. When something keeps showing up in places it shouldn't, you don't ignore it, you lean in. See, this isn't about a man, it's about a shadow. A shadow that moves quietly behind the veil of religion. A shadow that prepares the world for a figure who may not be what he seems. A leader dressed in white, cloaked in authority, followed by millions, but carrying a message that's been altered, just enough to sound holy, but pull hearts away from the truth. And this matters because right now, we're living in a world that is starving for leadership. Starving for someone to tell us what to believe, how to feel, where to go. But if you don't know who you are, you'll follow any voice that sounds confident, even if that voice leads you straight off a cliff. Young men, listen to me. You are being trained by culture to become obedient to influence, not rooted in truth. You're being softened, spiritually sedated, so that when this false figure rises, maybe tomorrow, maybe a decade from now, you won't even know he's not real. That's how deception works. It doesn't scream. It whispers. This is where it gets personal. This isn't about Vatican archives. This is about your discernment. Because if you can't see the shadow before it becomes flesh, if you can't feel the shift in your gut before the system fully turns, you'll wake up one day bowing to a lie and calling it God. So I'm telling you now, don't get obsessed with names. Don't chase conspiracies. Chase clarity. Chase the truth like your soul depends on it, because it does. There is a storm coming. Maybe it's called Leo. Maybe it's called something else. But if you're not planted, rooted, awake, you won't survive it. Not emotionally, not as a man. Because some lies don't break your faith. They bend it slowly until it's no longer faith at all. And by the time you realize it, it's already too late. We don't even realize we're doing it. We look at a man in robes, a man behind a pulpit, a man with a title, and we assume he's closer to God than we are. We assume he knows something we don't, without even realizing it. We give him our trust, our obedience, our faith. But what if we're not submitting to holiness? What if we're submitting to idolatry? See, it starts with honor. It starts with respect for tradition, for structure, for leadership. But over time, if your discernment dies and your convictions sleep, you begin to trade your relationship with God for a relationship with someone who claims to represent him, and that's not faith. That's spiritual codependency. Authority is only godly when it's anchored in truth, when a man's fruit matches his words, when his private life mirrors his public sermon, but when the title becomes more powerful than the truth. You are no longer in the presence of leadership. You're in the presence of control. The Vatican knows this. The religious elites know this. Governments, media movements, they all know the power of symbolic authority. Because if they can wrap deception in enough tradition, you'll believe it's sacred, even when it's poisoning you. Look around you. We have pastors preaching convenience instead of conviction. We have leaders telling you that masculinity is toxic, that obedience is weakness, that pleasure is peace. We have young men trading purpose for porn, trading strength for silence, trading worship for followers. And behind all of this, spiritual figures wearing authority like armor, but living in compromise. So let me ask you, who are you following? Because if the man you look up to stops pointing you to Jesus and starts pointing you to himself, run. And his crown was made of thorns, not gold. Don't be so eager to obey a man in power that you forget the power inside you. You don't need a priest to reach heaven. You need repentance. You don't need a title. You need truth. Because in the end, God won't ask you what denomination you followed. He'll ask you if you knew his voice and if you never heard it. It's because you were too busy listening to someone else's. Let's just be real. We are watching the slow death of masculine conviction, not just in culture, but in the church. Men are shrinking, disconnecting. We've been taught to be polite, to sit still, to smile, while everything around us burns. And if you think this is just about religion, it's not. It's about you. It's about your fire. Because somewhere between the incense and the stained glass, between the smoke and the Latin chants, the wild, the kind that leads, protects, speaks truth, repents boldly, it got extinguished. And in its play got performance, we got robes, titles, politics, pageantry. We replaced the lion of the lamb in chains. I'm not saying the church killed masculinity. I'm saying we let it. We let systems tell us real faith is soft, tame, politically correct. We stopped wrestling with God like Jacob and started outsourcing our courage to leaders who smile big but say nothing. And that's exactly what the spirit of this age wants. A generation of men who are spiritually numb, emotionally dull, unable to hear the whisper of God, because the voice of the world is just so loud. But here's what no one told you. Not with anger, not with arrogance, but with purpose, with clarity, with truth that's costly. You don't need another sermon. You need to wake up. Because if you don't fight to reclaim your masculinity, you'll drift into spiritual impotence. You'll sit in a pew, take communion, nod along, but never move the needle in your life. You'll be a ghost in your own story. And young men, you weren't made for that. The Jesus who flipped tables, who stared down demons, who stood alone before Rome. That's your model. Not the sanitized version. Not the commercialized poster boy version. The real, raw, blood-sweating, cross-carrying man of God. The church needs you, but not the tame you. Not the broken board scrolling for porn you. The awake you. Who leads? Who bows only to truth. Don't let this world, or even the church, talk you out of your fire, because the system might not miss you if you go quiet. But heaven will. You think you'd recognize evil when it walks in, don't you? You picture something dark, violent, obvious. But the truth, the most dangerous thing in the world, doesn't look like a monster. It looks like peace. It sounds like unity. It smells like incense. It smiles at you and says, "Don't worry, I'll lead the way." And if you're not anchored, if you're not discerning, you'll follow that light straight into a pit. Because darkness doesn't need to look like the devil to destroy your life. It just needs to look almost right. This is where most men lose their way. Not because they're evil. Not because they want to walk in deception, but because no one taught them how to see. We live in an age where false light is everywhere. False prophets on stages. False freedom in sex and self-worship. Even in the church. Yes, especially there. You'll find messages that make you feel good, but leave you empty. And if you're not spiritually awake, if you haven't trained your gut to know the difference between sacred and seductive, you'll be deceived and think it's faith. The Vatican knows this. Religious institutions know this. And trust me, the enemy knows this better than anyone. Because deception doesn't work unless it feels true. The man who rises in the spirit of Leo, or whatever name the world crowns next, he won't come swinging a sword. He'll come with diplomacy, with eloquence, with a gospel that's just soft enough to keep you sleepy, but just spiritual enough to make you think you're awake. And the scariest part, most men won't even question it, because they've been trained to obey the voice at the front of the church, not the whisper of God in their own chest. So I'm telling you now, if you don't learn how to test the light, you will follow the wrong fire. Not all light is holy. Not all peace is pure. Not every preacher speaks from heaven. You want to live as a man of God in this hour, you better develop a filter that sees through the smile, the robes, the politics, and locks on to truth like your soul depends on it. Because it does. There's a reason you feel confused right now. It's not because you're weak. It's because the world has trained you, since you were a boy, to trust your emotions more than your instincts, to obey feelings, not facts, to worship comfort and silence conviction. And now we've got a generation of young men who can spot a TikTok trend in 2 seconds, but can't tell the difference between truth and emotional manipulation in a church. Let me tell you something hard, but freeing. Your feelings are real, but they're not always right. That ache in your chest, the longing in the anger, the numbness, it's all real. But that doesn't mean it's the voice of God. If the enemy can't kill you with pain, he'll seduce you with peace. If he can't drag you into darkness, he'll distract you with light. That doesn't change you. And if he can't scare you, he'll flatter you. You think the devil only shows up in violence and rage. He shows up in the message that comforts you just enough to stop you from changing. That's the new gospel. A gospel of emotional safety, not holy surrender. A gospel that says, you're enough, but never calls you to grow up. Follow your heart. When God says, take up your cross, you were not made to be led by emotion. You were made to be anchored by truth. And truth doesn't always feel good. Truth breaks you before it heals you. Truth confronts your lust. It crushes your pride. It exposes your false peace. You want to be a real man in this age. You want to be strong when the world tells you to be silent. Then you need to crucify your need to feel good and resurrect your desire to be good, regardless of what it costs. Because there is a voice louder than your emotion. There is a path straighter than your desire. And there is a truth stronger than your trauma. But you won't hear it if all you want is to feel safe. The next great awakening won't come from comfort. It will come from men who are willing to feel the fire and still walk toward it. Discernment isn't emotional. It's spiritual. And if you want to reclaim your soul, you better stop letting your feelings lead your faith. We are not waiting for the war anymore. We're in it. This is not theory. This is not prophecy to entertain. This is reality playing out in real time, and most men are asleep at the gate. And do you know what's worse than being attacked? Not knowing you're under attack. That's where most of this generation lives. Distracted, addicted, lost in noise, taught to care more about vibes than vision, more about aesthetics than authority. And while men of God scroll endlessly through meaningless content, the lampstand is being removed right in front of them. This isn't just about Pope Leo. This isn't just about the Vatican or some historical mystery. This is about you. Because the real question is not, what is the church doing? The real question is, what or why are you doing? You've been appointed as a watchman, whether you wanted the job or not. A watchman doesn't get to sleep just because the city is quiet. He stays awake because he knows the enemy is never sleeping. A watchman doesn't wait for applause. He doesn't care who listens. He just sounds the alarm. And this generation is desperate for men who will do just that. Not lukewarm people, pleasing, emotion-led, but fierce, disciplined, who don't need permission to speak truth. You were made for this hour, not by accident, not by chance. You were born to see through the fog, to rise when others bow, to burn when the world grows cold, and to stand guard over a truth the world wants to bury. But here's the deal. There's no more time to figure it out. No more time to wait until you feel ready. No more waiting for a church, a pastor, or a priest to validate your mission. You're either a watchman, or you're asleep while the enemy scales the walls. There is no in between. So decide, right here, right now. Because the fire is coming. The line is being drawn. And if you don't take your place on the wall, no one else will. You still here? Good. That means something inside you isn't numb. It means something inside you heard the truth, and it didn't just hit your ears. It hit your spirit. Because this wasn't entertainment. This was a warning. This was God tapping on the door of your heart, saying, wake up, son. I'm not done with you. But you've got to stand. You've got to see. There are battles being fought right now in silence. battles for your mind, your masculinity, your faith, your future family. And the enemy doesn't care how talented you are. He just needs you distracted, muted, tired. Because a quiet man of truth is more dangerous than 1,000 loud liars. So if something in you broke open today, if something raw got stirred, don't just click away and forget this. Subscribe, because you need more truth in your life, not less. Like this video if it convicted you. Comment if you feel the war inside and you're done being silent. Share this with a brother who's drifting and needs a word that cuts deeper than the noise. Because the world doesn't need more content. It needs more men on fire. And sometimes it starts with a single voice saying, enough. I was made for more than this. If you heard that voice today, don't ignore it. You're not alone. You're not broken beyond repair. And you are exactly the kind of man God raises when empires fall and truth is scarce. And until then, stand watch, burn bright, never bow.